1 million people hit the streets in deadly protest against French President Macron. Massive clashes broke out between the police and protesters in Paris against the government of French President Emmanuel Macron and his new Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu. The unions accused the government of sacrificing taxpayer-funded public welfare for budget cuts. Trade unions held a day of strike to pressure the new Prime Minister to rethink budget cuts and act on wages, pensions and public services as the nation battles a high deficit and debt. Now, France, like many developed nations, is facing the demographic headache of an aging population, which means fewer workers being taxed and more people drawing the state pension. Many have called for Macron to resign, and the president, who already faces low approval ratings, is due to leave office in May 2027. Politicians on the left have called for tax rises rather than budget cuts. Now, the protests gave loud voice to widespread complaints that 8 years of leadership by France's business-friendly president have benefited too few people and hurt too many. Teachers, train drivers, pharmacists and hospital staff were among those who went on strike as part of the day of protests, while teenagers blocked dozens of high schools for hours. The unrest followed Prime Minister Bayrou's resignation last week after a vote of no confidence and a popular backlash against his government's fiscal policies. Bayrou's measures included a freeze on pensions, higher healthcare costs and the scrapping of 2 public holidays to generate more economic activity. Then, Macron's selection of a close ally, Sébastien Lecornu, as the new Prime Minister has further incited anger among people across the country. Now, Macron's opponents complain that taxpayer-funded public services like free schools and public hospitals, subsidized healthcare, unemployment benefits and other safety nets that are cherished in France are being eroded by his government that have lurched from crisis to crisis since it dissolved parliament in 2024, triggering a legislative election that stacked parliament's lower houses with critics of the president. Now, this protest followed the blocked everything anti-government protest of last week. Hundreds of protesters were arrested as part of the nationwide movement, which saw around 175,000 people take part and large police deployments in response. Angry mobs set fire to block highways and petrol stations across the country, erected barricades and caused damage that halted train and vehicular traffic, officials had said. Now, meanwhile, Macron's new Prime Minister is scrambling to put together a budget for next year as well as a new government. Lecornu and Macron are under pressure on one side from protesters and left-wing parties opposed to budget cuts, and on the other from investors concerned about the deficit in the Eurozone's second largest economy. Reportedly, the French government has for decades spent more money than it has generated. As a result, it has to borrow to cover its budget. Its debts now stand as the third highest public debt in the Eurozone after Greece and Italy, and equivalent to almost 50,000 euros per French citizen.